Beauty begins in a place most people never think to look. It doesn't start in the mirror, in perfect lighting, or in the approval of others. It begins in meaning. The kind of meaning that shapes your decisions, guides your actions, and defines who you are when no one is watching. When your life is driven by purpose instead of perception, something powerful happens. You stop asking, how do I look? And start asking, why do I exist the way I do? That shift alone separates surface-level beauty from something far deeper and far more lasting. Expand it, and don't shrink yourself to fit expectations. Don't dilute your identity to gain approval. Don't trade your purpose for temporary validation. Don't measure your worth by someone else's standards. The truth is, most people spend years chasing an image. They adjust themselves to fit trends, to match what society calls attractive, to meet standards that constantly change. But meaning doesn't change like that. Meaning is steady. It's rooted. It gives your life direction. And when you live with direction, your presence becomes undeniable. You walk into a room differently, you speak differently, you carry a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be announced. People feel it before they even understand it. About a person who knows why they do what they do. It reflects in their posture, in their tone, in the way they handle challenges. They don't break easily because they're not built on fragile foundations. Their identity isn't tied to compliments or criticism, it's tied to something deeper. And that depth creates a kind of beauty that no surface-level perfection can compete with. As time passes, this kind of beauty only grows stronger. While external appearances may change, meaning becomes clearer. You become more aligned with who you are. You stop wasting energy trying to impress people who were never meant to understand you. Instead, you invest that energy into becoming someone you respect. And self-respect changes everything. It sharpens your decisions, it strengthens your boundaries, it elevates your standards. People often underestimate how attractive purpose is. They think beauty is about symmetry, youth, or flawless presentation. But the reality is those things fade or lose their impact over time. Meaning doesn't. Purpose doesn't. In fact, they become more visible with age. The way you handle adversity, the way you stay grounded under pressure, the way you continue to grow, these are the things that make people stop and take notice. When you stop relying on the mirror to define you, you free yourself from constant comparison. You stop chasing unrealistic ideals and start building a life that actually fulfills you. And fulfillment has a glow of its own. It shows in your eyes, in your energy, in your presence. It's not loud or attention-seeking. It's steady, calm, and deeply attractive. There is also a certain peace that comes with living this way. You no longer feel the need to constantly prove yourself. You're not performing for an audience anymore. You're simply living in alignment with your values, and that authenticity is rare. In a world full of people trying to be seen, the ones who are truly understood are the ones who stand out. Meaning gives your life weight. It gives your beauty substance. Without it, everything feels temporary, fragile, and dependent on external factors. But with it, you become grounded. You become resilient. You become someone whose presence lingers long after you've left the room. And that's the kind of beauty most people spend their entire lives searching for without ever realizing it was never in the mirror. To begin with, confidence is not something you wake up with one day. It's not gifted to you by luck, status, or approval. It's built layer by layer, choice by choice, moment by moment. Most people misunderstand confidence because they think it comes after success, after validation, after everything falls into place. But real confidence is created long before any of that. It is forged in the moments when no one is watching, when the outcome is uncertain, and when quitting feels easier than continuing. Expand it, and don't wait for permission. Don't rely on applause. Don't tie your worth to outcomes. Don't shrink after failure. Don't abandon yourself when things get uncomfortable. The process of building confidence begins with keeping promises to yourself. Small promises at first, showing up when you said you would, doing the work even when you don't feel like it, choosing discipline over distraction. These moments seem insignificant on the surface, but they create a foundation. Every time you follow through, you send a message to yourself, you can be trusted. And self-trust is where confidence truly begins. There will be days when you doubt yourself, days when you question your abilities, your direction, even your identity. That's part of the process. Confidence doesn't mean the absence of doubt. It means moving forward despite it. It means acting even when you don't feel ready. Because the truth is, you will rarely feel ready. Growth doesn't wait for comfort, and confidence doesn't require certainty. As you continue, something begins to shift. You start to rely less on external validation. Compliments become less necessary, and criticism becomes less destructive. You begin to understand that other people's opinions are reflections of their perspective, not definitions of your worth. And when you reach that point, you become far less fragile. You stop being easily shaken by things that once controlled you. Failure plays a critical role in this process. Most people avoid it, fear it, see it as proof that they are not good enough. But failure is one of the most effective builders of confidence. Every time you fall and choose to get back up, you reinforce resilience. You prove to yourself that you can handle difficulty, and that proof becomes part of your identity. Confidence also requires ownership. Taking responsibility for your actions, your results, and your growth. It's easy to blame circumstances, to point at others, to make excuses, but none of that builds strength. Ownership does. When you take control of your life, you stop waiting for things to change and start making them change. And that shift creates a powerful sense of control and stability. Another key part of confidence is consistency. Not intensity, not perfection, consistency. Showing up again and again, even when progress feels slow, because confidence is not built in one breakthrough moment. It's built over time through repeated action. It's the accumulation of effort, discipline, and perseverance that creates something solid and unshakable. As you grow older, you begin to see confidence differently. It's no longer about proving something to the world. It's about being at peace with who you are. It's about knowing your strengths and accepting your imperfections without letting them define you. You stop chasing an image of confidence and start living it in a quieter, more grounded way. You also become more selective with where you invest your energy. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You set boundaries. You protect your time and your focus, because you understand that confidence is not just about what you do, it's also about what you refuse to tolerate. In the end, confidence is not a destination. It's a practice, a daily commitment to show up as your best self, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one else notices. And the more you practice it, the less you need to prove it, because it becomes part of who you are, something steady, something real, something that no one can take away once it's been built from within your scars. Tell a story most people will never fully understand. They are not signs of weakness, not reminders of failure, not something to be hidden or erased. They are evidence that you endured, that you faced something difficult and chose to keep going. In a world that often glorifies perfection, scars stand as quiet proof that real strength is built through struggle, not comfort. Expand it and don't hide your past. Don't apologize for your journey. Don't carry shame that was never yours. Don't pretend you were never broken. Don't forget how far you've come. Every scar has a beginning, a moment when something didn't go as planned, when life tested you in ways you didn't expect. It could have been loss, rejection, failure, or betrayal. In those moments, it feels like everything is falling apart. You question yourself, you question your worth, you wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. But what you don't realize in that moment is that something is being built inside you, something far more powerful than what is being taken away. Most people try to escape pain. They avoid it, suppress it, or distract themselves from it. But pain, when faced honestly, becomes a teacher. It forces you to grow, to adapt, to become stronger in ways comfort never could. And the scars it leaves behind are not there to remind you of the pain. They are there to remind you of your resilience. There is a certain depth that comes from having gone through something difficult, a perspective that cannot be taught, only experienced. You begin to see life differently. You become more aware of what truly matters. The things that once seemed important start to lose their weight, and the things that truly matter, peace, authenticity, connection, become clearer. Scars also reshape the way you see yourself. At first, you might see them as flaws, as imperfections that make you less than others. But over time, if you allow yourself to grow, that perception changes. You start to see them as part of your story. Not the whole story, but an important chapter. A chapter that proves you didn't give up. There is strength in that realization. Strength in knowing that you've already faced difficult moments and survived them. It changes the way you approach future challenges. You no longer see obstacles as impossible. You see them as something you can navigate, something you can overcome because you've done it before. People who have been through struggle often carry a different kind of presence. It's quieter, more grounded. They don't need to prove their strength because it's already been tested. They don't seek validation because they've already faced rejection and learned to stand on their own. Their confidence doesn't come from perfection. It comes from experience. Scars also create empathy. When you felt pain, you understand it in others. You become more patient, more compassionate, more aware of what people might be going through beneath the surface. And that ability to connect on a deeper level is a form of beauty that cannot be manufactured or faked. As time goes on, the meaning of your scars continues to evolve. What once felt like a burden becomes a source of power. What once caused pain becomes something that shaped your character. You begin to see that without those experiences, you would not be who you are today. You would not have the same strength, the same perspective, the same resilience. You stop wishing things had been easier. You stop wishing certain moments never happened. Instead, you start to appreciate the growth that came from them. Not because the pain was necessary, but because you made something meaningful out of it. Your scars do not define your limits, they define your capacity, your ability to endure, to adapt, to rebuild. They are reminders that even when things felt impossible, you found a way to move forward. And that is where true strength lives, not in avoiding the battle, not in pretending everything was always perfect, but in carrying the marks of what you've been through and still choosing to rise, still choosing to grow, still choosing to become someone stronger. Because of it, there comes a point in life when the performance becomes exhausting. The constant need to impress, to be liked, to fit into expectations that were never truly yours. For a long time, you may not even realize you're performing. It feels normal. Adjusting your personality depending on who you're around, saying what people want to hear, shaping your identity around acceptance. But eventually, something inside you starts to resist. A quiet realization begins to grow. This isn't who you are. This is who you've been trying to be. Expand it, and don't perform for approval. Don't dilute your truth to fit expectations. Don't chase validation that costs your identity. Don't silence your voice to stay accepted. Don't trade authenticity for temporary belonging. When that realization hits, it changes everything. You begin to question the roles you've been playing. The version of yourself you've been presenting to the world starts to feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. And that discomfort is important. It's a signal that you've outgrown the need to perform. It's the beginning of something more honest, more grounded, more real. Becoming is not a sudden transformation. It's a process of shedding. Letting go of the layers you built to protect yourself, to impress others, to avoid rejection. These layers were necessary at some point. They helped you navigate situations, relationships, environments. But what once protected you can eventually limit you. And growth requires you to release what no longer aligns. As you start this process, you may feel exposed. Without the performance, there's nothing to hide behind. No script, no mask, no carefully constructed image, just you. And that can feel uncertain at first, because authenticity doesn't come with guarantees. Not everyone will understand you, not everyone will agree with you, and not everyone will stay. But that's part of becoming. You stop trying to keep everyone and start choosing what is true. You begin to value alignment over approval. You realize that being accepted for who you're not is far more exhausting than being misunderstood for who you are. There is a different kind of confidence that emerges from this place. It's not loud or attention-seeking. It doesn't rely on external validation. It's quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. It comes from knowing that you are no longer pretending, that what people see is what is real. And that kind of honesty creates a presence that cannot be ignored. You also become more intentional. When you're no longer performing, your actions become more aligned with your values. You speak with clarity. You make decisions based on what matters to you, not what will impress others. Your time and energy become more focused because you're no longer wasting them maintaining an image. Relationships begin to change as well. Some may fall away, those that were built on the version of you that no longer exists. And while that can be difficult, it also creates space. Space for connections that are real, that are based on truth rather than performance. These relationships may be fewer, but they are deeper, more meaningful, more aligned. Becoming also requires patience. You won't have all the answers immediately. There will be moments of doubt, moments where you question if you're doing the right thing. But each step you take in alignment with your true self strengthens your foundation. It builds a life that feels more authentic, more stable, more fulfilling. Over time, you begin to notice the difference. The weight of constant performance lifts. The pressure to be something you're not fades. You feel more at ease in your own presence, more grounded in your decisions, more certain in your direction, and perhaps most importantly, you begin to respect yourself on a deeper level, because you're no longer compromising who you are for the sake of fitting in. You're no longer living for an audience. You're living with intention. This shift from performing to becoming is not about losing something, it's about returning to something. Returning to who you were before expectations shaped you, before fear told you to hide, before you learned to measure your worth through the eyes of others. And in that return, you don't just find authenticity, you find freedom, a kind of freedom that allows you to exist fully, honestly, and unapologetically as yourself, without the need to perform, without the need to prove, without the need to be anything other than who you truly are. Becoming energy speaks in ways appearance never can. Before a single word is said, before anyone notices what you're wearing or how you look, they feel something. That feeling, your presence, your emotional state, your intention, is what truly defines how you are experienced. You can look perfect on the outside, but if your energy is uncertain, tense, or seeking approval, it creates a disconnect. And people notice that, even if they can't explain it. Expand it and don't chase attention. Don't rely on appearance for validation. Don't ignore your inner state. Don't carry negative energy into every room. Don't underestimate the power of presence. Most people spend a significant amount of time focusing on how they appear, but very little time understanding how they feel within themselves. Yet it is that internal state that shapes everything. Your thoughts influence your emotions influence your behavior, and your behavior creates your presence. It's all connected. And when you become aware of that connection, you begin to shift your focus from external perfection to internal alignment. There is a noticeable difference between someone who is comfortable within themselves and someone who is not. It shows in their posture, in their tone, in the way they interact with others. A person who is grounded doesn't need to demand attention. They don't need to prove their worth through appearance. Their energy is calm, steady, and self-assured, and that kind of energy naturally draws people in. On the other hand, when someone is constantly seeking validation, it creates a different kind of presence. There's a subtle tension, a need for approval that can be felt beneath the surface. No matter how polished the exterior may be, that underlying energy affects how others perceive them. Because energy is honest, it reveals what appearance tries to hide. As you grow, you start to understand that managing your energy is far more important than managing your image. You become more aware of what affects your state of mind, the environments you choose, the people you surround yourself with, the thoughts you entertain. All of these contribute to your energy. And once you recognize that, you begin to take responsibility for it. This responsibility is not about being perfect or positive all the time. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing when your energy is off and taking steps to realign it. Sometimes that means stepping back, creating space, or choosing not to engage in situations that drain you. Other times it means facing difficult emotions instead of avoiding them, allowing yourself to process rather than suppress. There is also a level of authenticity that comes with aligned energy. When you are true to yourself, your energy reflects that truth. You don't have to force anything. You don't have to act a certain way to be accepted. You simply exist as you are, and that authenticity creates trust. People feel it. They respond to it. Over time, you begin to notice how powerful this is. You walk into a room, and without saying anything, your presence is felt. Not because you're trying to stand out, but because you are grounded, because you are not divided between who you are and who you think you should be. That alignment creates a quiet confidence that is far more impactful than any external feature. You also become more sensitive to the energy of others. You start to recognize when something feels off, when an interaction lacks sincerity, when an environment does not align with your values. And with that awareness comes choice. You no longer feel obligated to stay in spaces that don't support your growth or well-being. Energy is not something you can fake for long. Eventually, what is internal will surface. That's why real change doesn't come from adjusting your appearance. It comes from doing the internal work. From understanding yourself, from healing what needs to be healed, from building a mindset that supports who you want to become. When your energy is aligned, everything about you changes. The way you speak, the way you carry yourself, the way you connect with others. It becomes effortless, not because life is easy, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. And in that alignment, you realize something important. People may be drawn in by appearance, but they stay, they remember, and they are impacted by energy, because energy is what they truly experience. Long after the surface fades and the image is forgotten, there comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when everything you've been chasing begins to lose its grip on you. The need for approval, the constant comparison, the endless effort to prove your worth to others. For so long, you believed that being enough was something you had to earn, that if you worked harder, looked better, achieved more, or became someone different, then maybe, finally, you would feel complete. But that moment changes everything, because you begin to see the truth you were never lacking to begin with. Expand it. And don't seek constant validation. Don't measure your worth through comparison. Don't abandon yourself for acceptance. Don't believe you are behind. Don't ignore your inherent value. The idea that you are not enough is not something you were born with. It was learned, shaped by expectations, influenced by environments, reinforced by moments where you felt unseen or unappreciated. Over time, those experiences created a narrative, a quiet voice that questioned your value, that told you to do more, be more, achieve more, just to feel worthy. And without realizing it, you started living your life trying to answer a question that was never valid in the first place. Because being enough is not something that comes from the outside. It doesn't come from recognition, from applause, or from meeting someone else's standards. Those things are temporary. They come and go. And if your worth is tied to something temporary, it will always feel unstable, always uncertain, always just out of reach. Realizing you were always enough is not about becoming arrogant or ignoring growth. It's about understanding that your value is not conditional. That who you are at your core does not need to be justified or proven. Growth then becomes a choice, not a requirement for acceptance. You no longer evolve because you feel inadequate. You evolve because you respect yourself enough to continue growing. This shift changes the way you see everything. You stop comparing your journey to others. You stop feeling like you're behind or missing something, because you understand that your path is your own. It doesn't need to match anyone else's timeline. It doesn't need validation to be meaningful. There is also a deep sense of peace that comes with this realization. The constant pressure to perform fades. The need to be perfect loses its importance. You begin to accept yourself more fully, your strengths, your flaws, your past, your present. Not because everything is ideal, but because you no longer see imperfection as a reason to feel less than. You start to treat yourself differently, with more patience, more understanding, more respect. The way you speak to yourself changes. The way you respond to mistakes changes. Instead of harsh judgment, there is reflection. Instead of self-criticism, there is accountability without shame. Relationships shift as well. When you no longer seek validation, you no longer tolerate connections that make you question your worth. You choose people who align with you, who respect you, who see you without needing you to prove anything. And perhaps more importantly, you stop trying to hold on to people who don't. There is strength in this kind of self-awareness, a quiet, steady strength that doesn't need to be announced. You're not trying to convince anyone of your value anymore. You simply know it. And that knowing changes how you show up in the world. It also frees you from fear in many ways. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. Because once you understand that your worth is not at stake, those fears lose their power. You can take risks. You can step into uncertainty. Not because you are guaranteed success, but because your value is no longer dependent on the outcome. Over time, this realization becomes part of who you are. Not something you have to remind yourself of constantly, but something you naturally live from. It influences your decisions, your mindset, your interactions. It becomes your foundation, and from that foundation, everything else becomes more stable, more aligned, more real, because the truth is, you were never missing anything. You were never behind. You were never less than. You were simply taught to believe that you were, and the moment you stop believing that story is the moment you begin to see yourself clearly, not as someone who needs to become enough, but as someone who always was and always will be enough.